Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of PACE Perspectives. Paul Schrimpf here. Pleasure to be with you today, and just want to let you know that PACE Perspectives is an initiative of the PACE Executive Series. We're going to be doing interviews with smart and interesting and compelling individuals in the crop production market, to give us some ideas what's going on or some thoughts on things that they're working on. And the gentleman I have with me today is Ken Zuckerberg from CoBank. He really just monstrously hot off the presses delivered me a report on cooperatives and a cooperative system. And Ken, I just want to welcome you to the event and thank you for bringing this to us.
Thanks, Paul. Wonderful to be here with you and the event. And as you said, I think the report literally went out at 1 p.m. today. So wonderful to visit with you and talk about the report or anything else on your mind.
So the report is called Field of Agronomic Dreams, Rethinking the Farm Supply Co-op to Drive Value. And it's quite an interesting title, a little, I think, cinematic there, Ken. But perhaps you could talk about that a bit and then tell us a little bit about why this report and why now.
Terrific. Well, Paul, I love that movie, and it had baseball and crop farming in it all together. And I guess if you morph my thesis together, I'm thinking about if the ag retail sector can reinvent itself to deliver greater value, and the farm supply co-op sector in particular, then the customer will come. So build it and he will come. That was sort of the thought process. In terms of the report, why now and what's the story? So as you know, crop farmers and the cooperatives serving them have been through a heck of a ride here the past 7 years. Lots of challenges. Farmer income, excluding government payments, has been under pressure. Grain prices have been under pressure. More competition with China, more competition with other regions selling product into China. And, we have an environment here where how sustainable is the current environment with debt going up and revenue and income going down. So the thought process here was to take a step or two back and think about, what does the customer need? What are the options and opportunities available for cooperatives to deliver value? And how can we communicate such to the community? So that's really the backstory on bringing this report out to right now.
You also talk a good bit about the supply, the supply chain, when you're talking downstream with the manufacturers and suppliers and some of the things that they're doing, and just, the competition within the channel itself among the different partners. You want to talk about some of those things that you looked into?
Certainly, Paul. So the first starting point, whenever I look at an industry or a business within that industry, is sort of the competitive landscape. Michael Porter from Harvard put together this framework a number of years ago, and it's very straightforward. It talks about what are the power of suppliers, and in this case, this would be the input manufacturers that provide those important products, chemicals, fertilizer, seed, that the retailer would sell. Then looking at the power of the buyer, and in this case, this is the farmer, and then taking a balanced look at the entire environment, the threat of new entrants, and the long-term growth opportunities. So if you'll bear with me, let's put ourselves physically in the shoes of the retailer or the farm supply co-op. Above us, we have a set of 5 or so very, very large input suppliers. These have consolidated in recent years. These are public companies generally that are looking for predictable growth, and they're under pressure as much as anyone. So what I see happening over time is, just like in every single other industry out there, the manufacturers are likely to sell direct to customers without the services of a middleman. So that's from above. From below, the farmer themselves, there are, as you know, multiple categories of farmers in terms of quality and profitability. And as we see the less than stellar farmers consolidate or sell to larger entities, our thesis is that as these entities get larger, they get more sophisticated, they have greater capital to invest. They are increasingly searching for innovation and precision solutions, much like I read about in the work you do, Paul. But these folks also are very bottom line focused. And some years back, I spoke to a very large farmer in Iowa, and he told me that given the circumstances, he actually had to change relationships that dad and granddad had for many, many years because he just couldn't afford to source the inputs from these trusted relationships. So things are changing. So the buyer wants some enhanced services and they want to pay less. We are seeing the input manufacturers have the ability and the pressures on them to sell direct eventually. And then the environment is a bit difficult. We've gotten a good lift in grain prices recently, knock wood. However, we have a oversupplied market generally on a global basis. And, in a commodity business, Paul, doesn't matter what industry, there's only, there's really only two ways to win. First, you have to be the low cost operator. And second, you have to execute. So that's a bit of the backdrop that, we looked at in putting together this paper.
Sure. And you also looked pretty closely at the share, I guess the market share for cross ag retailer in general, and then kind of the reaction that we've seen at that wave of consolidation in what's happening on that front. Can you talk a little bit about your examination of that aspect of it?
Certainly. So mergers and acquisitions are by often defensive. I was going to say by definition, but that's not entirely true. There's many reasons to merge. First, it could be succession. Second, it could be a situation where there are natural synergies coming together, both revenue and expenses. And then in other cases, there can be a distressed situation where a larger, better capitalized player has come to the table. That's just generally that applies to virtually every industry. What we've seen in the cooperative space are a variety of interesting and different types of consolidations. Some are asset sales, purchases of assets. Sometimes there's also outright mergers of equals or mergers of entities that come together, in some cases two or three, to create greater value. It's my opinion, though, that mergers by themselves are difficult. They involve risk, execution risk. Sometimes the cultures don't mesh, and that can be problematic. We saw that a number of years ago in Pinnacle Ag and what they put together. They had a very good idea on putting together these subsidiaries that they acquired. However, the end result was different philosophies of sales. So as I think about it, just very purely, consolidation doesn't solve the underlying problem. It doesn't make grain prices go up. It doesn't address weather volatility. It sure as heck doesn't address what is or is not happening with the farmer. It tends to be defensive. And since CoBank has a long history focused on lending to the cooperative space, it's not like we're sitting here wishing that happens. In fact, quite the opposite. The way we think about it is we have a moment in time here where there are pressures and stressors. However, there's also ways to innovate and differentiate. And our hope is that instead of just merging or relying on consolidation, the cooperative management teams can think about other ideas to create value, which may include joint ventures and partnerships, but not necessarily selling the business and calling it a day.
And you do talk about some of those joint ventures partnerships that have happened recently, and some that have been around for a while that are pretty successful. With Land O'Lakes and Winfield, and the recent Greenpoint deal. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So I'd like to talk about it, but unfortunately we can't comment specifically on clients, but let me talk conceptually about what those transactions generally mean, and I think you'll find this to be valuable. So what I like about Land O'Lakes in the offering of the Winfield United offering is there is a excellence in terms of agronomy, research, development, and R&D and product. So if you think about having that capability, and other co-ops have that as well, having that capability and bringing it to another organization that has the in-force customer base, I think that's powerful. I think that's where you can look at the situation as having operational excellence in agronomy, bringing operational excellence of retail store or retail front or retail offering, or just plain good longstanding relationships with clients. That's interesting. I think there's also, when you think about value creation, I always start with the low-hanging fruit as well. So if there's an ability to bring a multi-product offering to your cooperative member and customer, be it fuel, be it feed, be it grain, be it storage, be it agronomy, to me, I think there's something magical about having a sort of a combination of products that your members need that actually can be managed under one roof. So those are some of the themes that touch upon some of the recent news items that you mentioned that's in the report. I think what's also interesting, Paul, if you don't mind me going just a little bit on a tangent, is some years ago when I was at Rabobank, we actually talked about the idea of, could an ag retailer combine with a fertilizer company? People thought we were crazy. And then Agrium and Potash Corp of Saskatchewan happened. So what's interesting about that for the world to study? Well, it's certainly vertical integration, and now you have a hybrid company that has ag retail as well as proprietary product. The margins on potash are much higher than the margins on ag retail. So in that sense, it was accretive as long as the purchase price was correct. And I guess when you think about having control over product, control over distribution, and being able to offer the customer a more integrated offering, that's kind of what I'm thinking about here when we look at the cooperative space and the non-cooperative retail space. How can you add more value, be it product or service?
Sure. You had a couple of other specific things that you, in your kind of as you're closing the report and your conclusions about trying to be competitive and some of the things that cooperatives and retail operations can do. You want to talk about some of those in addition to some that you brought up already?
So certainly, if we think about ideas, and again, I want to be clear that these are not recommendations, but rather ideas for boards of directors and management teams to consider. So again, thinking about the low-hanging fruit, pursue the low-hanging fruit first. Look at general operational efficiency. Undergo a process where you can think about which business assets are still active and worthy of ownership, and which may not be so relevant or may be idle. I think that's a very, very important idea. And if you think about the analogy to portfolio management in the investment context, we're talking about the same thing here. Are the assets that you're owning and managing still delivering the returns that you expect them to be? So that would be probably the first call. Aligning with a strategic partner, a regional or a local competitor that may have transportation or infrastructure assets that you don't have. To me, it's always important a date before you get married. So in the end game, if you think about potentially a strategic merger, why not have the optionality of having a joint venture first, looking at whether or not the cultures are compatible, if you have the same business philosophy serving members in rural communities. In addition, a number of different players have started down the path of more advanced precision agriculture. Paul, as you write about quite a bit in the work you do. So if there's a partner with technological capabilities or automation capabilities that you don't have, and you get along well, and 1 + 1 is at least 2 and maybe more, then a strategic joint venture could be very good for both. And perhaps a little more edgy idea, if you will, is thinking about this new wave of ag technology startups, some of which are mid-stage and late stage now, variety of aerial imagery and crop diagnostic firms, or even robotics companies that add tremendous value to, that potentially add value to the system. You think about the digitalization of agriculture, and here we are, Paul, what, on year 6 or 7 of that journey, and adoption has been relatively low. The buy-in by farmers has been clouded by a number of things, mainly a lack of definitive return on investment and somebody to help show them the way. So when I step back and think about what could change for digital agriculture, well, first, what's not going to change with the retailer or the co-op? Strong local relationships, right? Bring that in with some innovation, and I think you have a terrific formula for at least experimentation and exploring. Now, not to go on a soapbox, but if you ask me, what do you do first? And what's the very first next step after listening to this discussion that you and I are having, or right now it's a lecture, but I'll keep it short. First, you have to ask the hard question. Does your business strategy look forward and embrace change, be it technology or just customer changes, or does it defend the past? And if it defends the past and doesn't consider a new environment, that can be fatal. I'm happy to talk about some examples there, but I actually will tell you, based on the John Wooden quote, which I wrote down here, failure is not fatal, but failure to change is. And I think that transcends every business across every single industry.
Absolutely. It's something that we talk about often, and sometimes you don't understand the need to change until it's too late. But you're right, that culture, it has to come from the top. You need to kind of embrace that, or have at least someone kind of in charge of thinking out that far and raising the flag when there's a problem, right?
You have to be able to speak about the unspeakable and have that internal conversation where people come together and think about, okay, what are our current assumptions? Where is the future going? Where are we in the future? And as I often say, this is not easy. Nobody wants to be accused of being stodgy in their thinking or not forward thinking, but it's not about that. I guess I would say, Paul, it's about having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. And the growth mindset is just opening yourself up to thinking a little bit differently. It reminds me of something from the 70s. Paul, do you remember the Kodak moment? That used to be their classic, advertising. This is a Kodak moment, take a picture.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So there was another Kodak moment, which unfortunately was a fatal one. And as the story goes, Kodak had a gentleman internal, a scientist, I guess, or an engineer, probably more appropriately, that created the digital camera. And he, professed, and this has been talked about in case studies across many business schools, talked about the future. So Kodak actually understood digital photography. They had a lot of the initial patents and the expertise in it. And they decided to build and sell digital copiers, but rather not move to digital cameras. So the question is why? So the why was they didn't want to cannibalize their existing 85 to 90% market share of the film and camera market. So that was in the 70s. And then a few decades later, Kodak declared bankruptcy, sold its patents, restructured, and today is a smaller and much different company. Let's not make this mistake in agriculture, right? We've also seen it more recently in the form of Blockbuster Video and Netflix. So Blockbuster had, 1,000 stores, if not more, in the United States. They had a great offering. And then this little startup came along that used to deliver DVDs in the mail, and you could watch the movie that way. And then they came across something called digital streaming. So today, Netflix, which Blockbuster Video had the opportunity to buy for some $50 billion, Netflix is like a $200 billion company, and Blockbuster is gone. So again, let's learn from some of these tectonic shifts of the past and think about not repeating them in agriculture.
Well, this is good stuff, Ken. I really appreciate your time today. Very interesting. We have a link to the report here in our comments area, so feel free to download that. And we appreciate you joining us and sharing your thoughts.
Always nice to visit with you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this edition of Pace Perspectives, and we'll see you next time.